Good afternoon. Kurt Gem with Century Commercial Real Estate here and back in our office in Hartford, Connecticut. I'm here with Pat Wellspeak with Wellspeak Dugas Kane, and they are an appraisal and consulting firm located down in Cheshire. Been in business over 25 years with that firm, and then Pat has history prior to that, about 10 years in the industry. So welcome, Pat, to the new norm.
Thanks, Kurt.
So I appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Needless to say, we're the new norm means different things to different people. Catch us up. What's happening? How are things going? What does the new norm look like for you?
So in our business, I'll say, we went through what everybody else went through, a period of slowness, certainly at the end of March and April. We were fortunate that we had a backlog of work that was going to take us into May. But during April, we got 0 calls for new business. And as a business owner, that's obviously a very scary time. Fortunately, as May started, we got more calls. We get business from a diverse group of entities, sure, whether it's law firms, financial institutions, municipalities, et cetera. And it really took people going back to work to get the phones ringing for us. Then we had the problems that everyone else had, which is the staffing issues. We had virtually all of our staff working from home. When we're at full capacity, we have 9 or 10 people in the office. And I would say once we started going back, it was 3 to 4 was the norm. And we didn't have our support staff with us. She stayed at home until the end of June, and we worked to create a safe environment with plexiglass around her. The one thing I can say that's old norm, new norm, is that we were fortunate in that our office is one of hard-walled individual offices where everybody can walk in and close their door. So the only person that was, I'll say, exposed was our support staff. And like I said, we let her stay home the longest, sure, and set up a safe environment for when she came home.
Awesome. So you're running about half staff now.
Yeah, I'd say maybe a little more. And I can say as a user of office space, I like being there. So for the people that say they like working at home, I'm more of an in the office kind of guy. And I think that there will be some soft costs that businesses realize about having people out as much as they've been out the last 6 months.
Yeah, I think the challenge is maintaining culture.
Exactly.
And it's certainly in a small firm. I had Dave Glissman on, attorney Dave Glissman, I think you probably know, from Hartford. Sure. And he has 11 attorneys. And he says right now he's got 11 mini satellite offices, and the culture is hard to maintain. So, I find that people want to be in an area where they can communicate and exchange ideas and thoughts.
Yeah, so I think it's culture and development, right? I mean, if sure, you have newer people and you're trying to bring them along and mentor them, it's a real challenge doing that remotely.
Absolutely. It takes a different kind of mindset to drive, business day to day.
Absolutely.
Being work at home. So tell me, what is going on in your industry? Obviously, there's lots of challenges. We've got moratoriums. We've got non-payment of rent. We've got negotiations going on from tenant and landlord perspectives. How has valuation changed over the last 6 months? What are your challenges in that area?
So I'll say that there's some operational challenges, and then there's just some, I'll say, valuation challenges. So operationally, one of the first things we do when we're valuing a property is to inspect it. And so for certain asset classes, that's become far greater of a challenge. If you think about multifamily as an example, where we're going through apartment buildings to see a sampling of units. Both from our perspective of not being real excited about going into somebody's living space that you don't know, and theirs about letting a stranger in the unit. The level of due diligence that we would perform going through a multifamily complex is somewhat reduced because a lot of places aren't letting us in, or it's very restricted in terms of the access to a property that we can get. Conversely, with office buildings, we're pretty much getting free reign because there's nobody in the spaces. I just did some work at Merit 7 in Norwalk, which is 6 buildings over 1,450,000 square feet. And there were 80 employees in the whole complex the day that I went.
Wow.
So you really get unfettered access in that regard. The other operational challenge is just connecting with people, whether it's people at the municipal level, like we want to confirm something at planning and zoning, and the town halls weren't open and you had to leave voicemails or emails. Just found people to be a little less responsive during this time. So, that was a challenge. Again, that's all on the operational side. On the valuation side, the challenges are different. They're trying to figure out, how does COVID impact value? And I think everybody's trying to get their arms around that. Early on in this pandemic, I was in a group call with some brokers, other appraisers, and we were going to try and brainstorm, and everybody concluded it was too early. As time's gone on, I'll say that we've staked our flag in certain positions, looking at various asset classes and saying some are more impacted, some are less impacted, some maybe are better off.
Sure.
I think some of the net lease grocery stores and pharmacies that have truly proven to be essential businesses are looking like very desirable investments, and have probably had cap rate compression since interest rates have declined, and they've been proven to be very safe investments. Other property types like industrial have fared tremendous, but then you have the negatives of hospitality, entertainment, and retail.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's going to be a challenge moving forward. I mean, I think they had expected e-commerce to grow by 6% in 2020,
right?
And they're at 16 now.
Okay.
So
blowing away the projections.
Exactly. So it's a ping pong ball effect, and that with the return of onshoring, distribution and manufacturing, the shift is happening, and I don't think we'll see a market quite like this, for some time. I think everybody wasn't prepared to go past 90 days, certainly in that grocery sector, in terms of stock and supply. And so that's been interesting. What have you seen? You talk about forbearance, and of course the government came out and said, don't worry about getting kicked out of your apartment until January 1. Where do you see the valuation challenges in looking at, multifamily, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, multi-unit properties, in terms of whether they're paying rent, not paying rent? How are you handling that?
So we communicate with the owners and go through the rent rolls. The funny thing was that early on, owners were fairly successful in collecting rent, because obviously people were getting supplemental income from the government. That made it a little easy. I mean, we all hear the stories about people who were earning more being unemployed than they were working. So that certainly helped out. Moving forward, obviously, as those payments have gone away or will be reduced, it's becoming more of a challenge. The developers and owners that we spoke with that had been operating at 95 to 97% occupancy on the multifamily level are now reporting mid 80s. Okay. So it's a question of how long do we think that's going to last?
Sure.
And there's, some other wild cards about what was a functional apartment unit prior to COVID versus what is today. Many places, renters were satisfied with smaller units and having more amenity space. And right now, working out of their apartment as opposed to working out of an office, they're more interested in having their own personal space as opposed to having large amounts of community space. Interesting.
Do you feel like the overall impact of that is, I mean, clearly, I'm hearing lending is tightening. And are you being challenged even more with the tightening of the lending market and sort of the unknown on payment of rent? What do you think the first quarter looks like in the lending area from a valuation perspective? If that's the right way to ask that question, does that make sense?
That's one of the things we've done throughout this process is communicated regularly with lenders, both on their valuation teams and the lenders themselves, to find out how active they are, what asset classes they're favoring. It does seem that for certain property types, and certainly properties owned by strong sponsors, that lenders are still putting money out there. But I think that for property types like retail, where you're unanchored, don't have a grocery anchor, things like that, much more challenging to get debt. Also much more challenging to get debt where you don't have a source of income to pay back the loan, such as a land loan.
Yeah, that makes sense. It makes sense. So, looking forward to, obviously people returning to work, and I think the major corporations are sort of like, let's hold back and see, the health and well-being, I think, is on the forefront of everybody's mind. And, we're certainly challenged, in bringing our people back to work and making sure that they feel comfortable. And I think the office market clearly is having the greatest impact, from that perspective. And it's certainly taken a sting out of the hustle and bustle of a downtown, rural area, or a CBD area. And what are you seeing trending? Do you look at that? Do you track trends in terms of outward movement? Connecticut is getting a lot of growth, from people coming out of the city. Do you see the second tier cities, third tier cities like Hartford, benefiting, or are they going to feel the same sort of move to the suburbs, move from the smaller apartment into a house and neighborhood, et cetera? Are you getting any insight on that? What the traffic is looking like?
Yeah, so I'd say we don't value individual single-family residences, but we keep track of it, and certainly the single-family market has been doing tremendously well throughout the state.
Agreed.
They say that there's been, I think it was in Q2, 10,000 change of addresses from New York to Connecticut, where the norm the prior year was 1,200. So you have a tenfold increase in relocations out of New York. That's certainly benefited certain markets more than others. I think Fairfield County has felt the benefits of that. The shoreline communities from Branford to Old Saybrook have benefited from that. But I think even in central Connecticut, whether it's communities in New Haven County or Hartford County, while they're probably not attracting former New York residents, the low interest rate environment has, I'll say, forced some younger people who were maybe comfortable living in a multifamily situation and not making the commitment to ownership to say, now's the time.
Yeah, I agree.
So I do think that the uptick in single family pricing at various price points is adversely impacting the multifamily market. In terms of office relocations, my understanding is there's certainly been a lot of people who have space needs, or leases coming up in the New York metro area, looking at Fairfield County, Northern Jersey, Westchester. I don't think those people are going to move all the way up to New Haven or Hartford. I don't like to be a pessimist or negative, but I've heard that cry for my entire career.
Yeah,
and I really don't see that. I think one thing that's going to be interesting is some of the companies that were anxious to go back into the CBD had left the CBD for the suburbs, whether it be in Hartford, Stamford, et cetera, and now wanted to get back into the CBD. Are they still going to have that appetite, or are those suburban markets going to strengthen a little more?
Yeah, it's interesting for sure. I know Hartford was benefiting from a startup ecosystem, a lot of startup companies coming through, like 5 or so cohorts.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we were running probably about 100 startups a year over, steady for the past 3 years. And so there's some efforts going to try to keep that ecosystem. So it's a challenge for sure. I think for the last quarter of the year, it'll continue to be a challenge. And all we can do for 2021 is be prepared to see what comes down our way. And
yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be a challenge certainly in the short term. I mean, just creating velocity is a challenge in the short term. Also getting people to commit to CBD and high rises with elevators and all that sort of thing will certainly be more challenging. But if there's one thing that we've learned in our careers is people do tend to have shorter memories. And as things normalize, there were a lot of benefits being offered by being in an urban area, by being in a CBD. And sure. I think people will appreciate those again. But in the short term, it's going to take some time to get over that.
Agreed. Well, listen, I appreciate your time today. I don't want to keep you too long. And, the insight and update relative to the market and changes you've seen. I think our audience appreciates that as well. Maybe we can have you back in a bigger forum with Mark Duclos, maybe David Glissman, and do a little roundtable. That would be fun. So
that'd be awesome.
Appreciate it, Patrick. And we will talk soon.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
You bet.
Bye.